They didn't just fire me. They threw a party for the person replacing me and made me walk past the glass wall so I could see every second of it. I remember thinking if humiliation had a sound, it would be the clink of those champagne glasses. On the other side of the conference room window, people I'd mentored for years were raising their flutes, all smiles, while my security badge had already stopped working downstairs. 15 years of my life reduced to a toast with my name edited out. My name is Austin Rodriguez. I'm 48, and until about an hour before that moment, I was the senior traffic systems engineer at a firm called MetroSync Dynamics. If you've ever driven through a city where the lights seem to just know when to turn green so emergency vehicles could slide through like ghosts, that's what I built. Not the logo, not the sales deck, the brain behind the whole thing. But that afternoon, none of that mattered. All that was left of me at MetroSync fit inside a damp cardboard box. I felt the rain soaking through my shirt as the two security guards walked me down the hallway. One of them was Steve. For years, every morning, I'd stop at his desk, ask about his grandson's baseball games. He used to show me photos on his phone, proud grandpa grin and all. That day, he stared straight ahead like I was a stranger he'd been warned about. He muttered something that sounded like, "Sorry, Austin," they insisted. But he wouldn't look me in the eye. I could see the tension in his jaw. An order is an order. When the elevator doors opened on the lobby, the sound hit me first. Laughter. Music from a Bluetooth speaker. The sharp pop of a champagne cork. You know that muffled way sound travels through glass? It was like listening to a party happening underwater. They'd booked the big corner conference room for my replacement's welcome reception. I could see through the frosted stripes on the glass. Gold balloons, those fancy charcuterie boards, a banner that read, "Welcome Lindsay," in bold blue letters. Not farewell anything. No thanks for service. Just a clean erasure. Rachel, my boss, was in there, holding a glass up high. I watched her mouth move, and I didn't need to hear the audio to know what she was saying. I'd heard versions of it in meetings for months. Lindsay will bring structure to the creative chaos Austin left us. Time to modernize our approach. Standardization will help us scale. On this particular afternoon, as the security guards waited for me to keep walking, I could read her lips as clear as subtitles. She'll clean up his mess. Her words landed harder than the rain. My mess. The mess she was talking about was a living, breathing traffic control system that had taken me a decade and a half to teach the city how to move. It knew that on Tuesdays in April, the high school games ended 15 minutes later than the schedule said, because the coach always gave his "don't waste your potential" speech. It knew that when the university had graduation, foot traffic spiked 3 blocks away from the stadium where the families liked to take photos. It knew that drizzle and thunderstorms created completely different patterns, even if the weather app just called both rain. None of that showed up on a PowerPoint slide. I shifted the box in my arms, feeling the bottom sag a little. One old coffee mug, a photo of my daughter from before she stopped talking to me for a while, a stack of scribbled notebooks full of diagrams and arrows that only I could truly read. 15 years condensed into a box that was starting to fall apart in the parking lot. Outside, the rain was coming down sideways. The guards followed me all the way to my truck, because apparently a man who kept the city moving for over a decade was suddenly a security risk once HR hit terminate in the system. I tossed the box into the passenger seat. A cracked frame slid to the edge. It was a picture of Jessica at her high school graduation. Cap crooked, grin too wide for her face. I hadn't been there when the photo was taken. I'd watched the ceremony later that night on a shaky live stream from my office, because there had been a nasty chain of incidents on the east side and the system needed real-time corrections. Her mother never let me forget that. I climbed into the driver's seat, wiped the fog off the inside of the windshield with my sleeve, and sat there for a minute, engine idling. Through the rain-streaked glass, I could still see the party upstairs. Someone had hooked up a slideshow. I watched the light flicker across their faces, and for a second I wondered if any of my charts were in there, rebranded as legacy documentation. It stung because I knew exactly when this had started. 6 months earlier, the mayor had come by to tour our control center. Back then, the room felt like a cockpit for the entire city. Wall-to-wall screens, streams of real-time traffic data, camera feeds, color-coded maps with lines pulsing as congestion rose and fell. I'd stood there like a conductor with a strange-looking orchestra, explaining how emergency response times had dropped by almost a quarter, how overall congestion was down nearly a fifth. The mayor had asked, "How does it actually work?" And I tried to answer, talking about machine learning models and adaptive algorithms, but then drifting into the truth, that it was also built on thousands of tiny observations, the kind you only get from being awake when everyone else is sleeping. The board had smiled politely. Later, I heard one of them say they needed someone who could translate genius into process. Enter Lindsay. I remember her first day. Wharton MBA, immaculate blazer, perfectly straight hair pulled back into a low ponytail. She walked into the weekly meeting with a deck so glossy, it practically reflected the overhead lights, talking about standardizing inputs and modularizing our optimization frameworks. Rachel had introduced her with that practiced corporate smile that never reached her eyes. "She's here to support your workload, Austin. Bring in some fresh perspectives." Translation: "We don't understand what you're saying, so we've hired someone who speaks our language and will eventually wear your job title." At first, I tried to be generous. I answered her questions, even the ones that made me bite my tongue. Why did we have two different logic sets for the same intersection on different days of the week? Why did I manually override the algorithm on nights when there were minor league games, but not when there were concerts? Why did the documentation mention Elm Street Tuesday rain anomaly, like it was some private joke? I'd say, because on Tuesdays, the middle school lets out at the same time the early shift at the plant ends. You get parents, kids, and exhausted workers all hitting the road in that 10-minute window. It changes how people drive. She'd blink, then ask, "Have we validated that with a study?" I want to say, yeah, 15 years of me sitting in my car at that intersection, notebook in hand, counts as a study. But instead I'd just shrug and tell her I'd send her my notes. The thing about a system like mine is the code is only half the story. The other half is the part no one can see. The hours spent driving the city at weird times of day, noticing where people actually walked versus where the sidewalk was painted. The way a small grocery store closing on one corner shifted traffic 3 blocks over. The patterns that never made it into any manual. Lindsay didn't respect that half. To her, anything that couldn't be put in a spreadsheet or a slide with bullet points was tribal knowledge, and tribal knowledge made executives nervous. The writing was on the wall long before the security guards showed up at my cubicle with that awkward stiffness that says we don't want to be here either. They called me into HR with the usual script. Strategic restructuring. Realignment of resources. Thank you for your contributions. No mention of the nights I slept on the office couch because a storm had rolled in and I didn't trust the old backup systems. No mention of the time I missed an anniversary dinner because a multi-car pileup threatened to snowball if we didn't reroute traffic in minutes. When they took my badge and told me security would walk me out, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. It was either that or break something. On the drive home, the rain hammered the roof of my truck like someone drumming their fingers impatiently. My phone lit up once on the passenger seat, then again. Unknown number. Then Lindsay Brooks. Then again, and again. I let it ring. Every vibration felt like a small victory. They wanted me gone. Fine. Let them figure it out without the mess I supposedly left behind. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, there were 8 missed calls. A couple hours later, 15. No voicemails, just her name over and over, like the system itself was begging through her hands. My place was exactly as depressing as I'd left it that morning. No family photos on the walls anymore. Sarah had taken those when she moved out 2 years earlier. Just shelves of technical books, half-empty coffee cups, and takeout containers stacked near the trash because I kept telling myself I'd sort the recycling this weekend. My divorce papers were still in a folder on the kitchen counter, under a stack of printed traffic reports. The last real argument Sarah and I had was about the system, too. She'd said, "You're married to that control room, not to me." And I hadn't had the courage to argue, because in that moment, she was probably right. I kicked off my wet shoes, tossed my keys into the bowl by the door, and sank onto the couch. The room was quiet in that heavy way only apartments get when you live alone for too long. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table, screen lighting up my face in the half-dark. Lindsay Brooks. I let it ring out, then flipped the phone face down. For the first time in 15 years, I had nowhere to be in the morning. Number 5 a.m. call from a dispatcher about a pileup on the freeway. No panicked email from some city official asking why the lights downtown felt off during a festival. No performance review where someone who couldn't read a traffic heat map told me to communicate my value more clearly. Just me, a sagging couch, a stack of worn notebooks, and a city outside my window that, for the first time, would have to figure out how to breathe without the man who'd been quietly telling its lungs when to inhale and exhale. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain drum on the glass, and told myself I didn't care what happened when Monday morning rush hour hit. I told myself they deserved whatever chaos was coming. I told myself that walking away was the cleanest kind of revenge. My phone buzzed again on the table, rattling against the wood. I didn't pick up. Not yet. By Sunday morning, the city was already screaming. I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds and the stale smell of cold coffee sitting on the table from the night before. For a few minutes, I let myself pretend the world outside wasn't unraveling, that my phone hadn't buzzed itself half to death with calls I refused to answer. But then I checked the notifications. 23 missed calls. 12 from Lindsay. 5 from the main office line. 3 from Stephanie. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. The rational part of me said, ignore it. Not your problem anymore. But the engineer in me, the part that had spent 15 years teaching the city how to breathe, knew exactly what those calls meant. And I'll be honest. A small, petty part of me wanted them to burn for what they did. So I made breakfast slowly. Toast, eggs, coffee I actually drank hot for once. I sat at the tiny kitchen table, listening to the muted hum of traffic from 8 floors below. It didn't sound right. The rhythm was off. Too many stops. Too many horns. If you've ever spent 15 years listening to traffic patterns, you can hear panic before anyone reports it. My phone buzzed again. Stephanie Wells. I let it ring twice before I answered. Her voice hit me like a punch. Breathless. Shaking. Austin? Oh, thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. A little busy ignoring calls from people who fired me. Austin, please don't hang up. Her voice cracked. It's bad. Really bad. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the condensation on my water glass. The downtown grid collapsed yesterday, she continued. Everything. Dozens of intersections went out of sync. Cars stacked for blocks. 2 ambulances couldn't get through. They had to call helicopters for medical emergencies. A dull ache tightened in my chest. What happened? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Lindsay tried to implement her standardized algorithm package. It worked in simulations, but under real load the entire East Quadrant desynchronized. She swallowed hard. Austin. People are getting hurt. I closed my eyes. I could practically see it. Lines of cars choking intersections, honking in waves, drivers trapped. Emergency vehicles stalled behind seas of brake lights. Real humans paying the price for corporate vanity. So call Rachel, I said. I don't work there anymore. I did, Stephanie whispered. Everyone did. She's panicking, Austin. And Lindsay. She's drowning. Something about the way she said it made me pause. But pride is a stubborn thing when it gets bruised. Well, I said. Maybe next time they won't fire the one guy who understood the system. Austin, she said, voice breaking. This isn't about them anymore. A little girl had a seizure in the back of an ambulance last night. They couldn't get her to the hospital. Her mother was screaming for someone to change the lights. My breath caught. Just for a second. Stephanie lowered her voice. Real people are getting hurt. Not Rachel. Not Lindsay. Not the board. Regular people. My throat felt tight. I hadn't expected that. But before I could answer, she whispered, I'm begging you. Please. I hung up without responding. Not because I didn't care. I cared too much. That was the problem. I walked to the window and looked out at the city I'd spent so long listening to. The skyline looked normal. Crisp lines, reflective glass, sun bouncing off towers. But underneath that surface, I could picture the arteries clogging. 15 years of work, unraveling in one weekend. My doorbell rang. I froze. No one ever visited me. Not since the divorce. Not since Jessica moved away to Denver. When I opened the door, Rachel stood there like someone who hadn't slept since Thursday. Her hair was tangled, makeup smeared under her eyes, her blazer wrinkled like she'd been living in it. And for the first time since I met her, she looked less like an executive and more like someone who'd run out of plans. "Austin," she said, forcing a smile that twitched at the edges. "Can we talk?" I leaned on the doorframe. "About what?" "We're experiencing complications with the system transition." "Complications," I repeated. "Is that what you called me when you toasted my replacement?" She flinched. Actually flinched. "That was poor timing," she stammered. "No," I said. "It was perfect timing. It told me exactly what you thought of 15 years of my work." She took a shaky breath. "Austin, the city is falling apart. Emergency services are compromised. There have been accidents. Real consequences. And Lindsay, she's doing her best. But..." She hesitated, choking on the truth. "Your architecture is more complex than we understood." I crossed my arms. "My mess, you mean? Isn't that what you called it?" She tried to regroup. "Look, we're prepared to offer you a consulting contract. Double your old salary. Just help us stabilize things." The bitterness in my chest simmered. This woman had made me walk out in the rain with a cardboard box while she toasted the person she hired to replace me. And now she was standing on my doorstep asking for help because she didn't understand the thing she'd torn out of my hands. "No," I said. Her eyes widened. "Austin, this isn't about personal feelings. Lives are at stake." My voice came out colder than I expected. "Lives were always at stake. You just didn't care when it cost me something." She clenched her jaw. "I'll go to the board. I'll make sure no one hires you again." I smiled. "Just a small one. Go ahead. Tell them exactly how you mismanaged the transition. Tell them you fired the only person who understood the system. Tell them you didn't plan for knowledge transfer. I'm sure they'll love that." Her face drained of color. For the first time, she looked scared. She left without another word. As soon as the elevator chimed shut, the anger inside me wavered, just a little. Because beneath the anger was something worse. Guilt. Not guilt for Rachel. Never for her. Guilt for the people stuck in intersections right now, honking and sweating. Guilt for the paramedic who couldn't get to the cardiac arrest in time. Guilt for the mother watching her child's lips turn blue in the back of an ambulance. I grabbed my keys. If the city was suffering, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Downtown looked like a battlefield made of metal and frustration. Horns blared non-stop. Cars were jammed so tightly at one intersection that drivers had stepped out of their vehicles to yell at each other. A man in a business suit was waving his arms in the air, shouting at the sky. On 5th Street, I saw an old man waiting at a crosswalk. The walk signal never came. For 8 minutes he stood there, hunched over his cane, cars inching past him with no break. It hit me in the gut. Every misfiring signal, every wrong timing, every moment of chaos. This wasn't revenge. This was collateral damage. And I couldn't let an entire city pay the price for what a handful of executives did to me. Back in my truck, I stared at the steering wheel until my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. "Austin Rodriguez?" "Yes. This is Mayor Rivera. We need to talk. Immediately." Her tone wasn't desperate. It wasn't angry. It was determined. In that moment, everything shifted. A door opened. Not back to the company that humiliated me, but forward to something bigger than all of them. And I intended to walk through it on my terms. City Hall wasn't what I expected. I thought I'd walk into a circus. Reporters clawing for answers, staff sprinting around with clipboards, panicked murmuring bouncing off the marble floor. Instead, the building felt eerily controlled. like a storm that had learned to sit still. A young assistant escorted me to a private conference room. Frosted glass, a long wooden table, 2 mugs of untouched coffee waiting like a peace offering. 5 minutes later, Mayor Monica Rivera walked in. I'd met her twice before in professional settings, once during a system demonstration, and once at a roundtable about emergency response time. She'd always carried herself with a calm, analytical steadiness. Today, that steadiness was cracked around the edges. Not broken, but strained, like someone forcing composure through sheer willpower. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, offering her hand. "I haven't agreed to anything," I replied. A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not offended, more like she expected that answer. "I know. But you're here, which means at least part of you still cares what happens to this city." I didn't respond. The truth was uncomfortable, sitting heavy in my chest. She took a seat and gestured for me to do the same. "Let's be direct," she began. "The city is in crisis. Emergency response times have nearly doubled. Schools can't run their bus schedules. Commerce is slowing down. Last night alone, we recorded 3 traffic-related fatalities that might have been preventable." My stomach tightened. She continued, voice steady but low. "The system worked beautifully 6 months ago. In some ways, it was revolutionary. So I need to understand. Why is it falling apart now?" I exhaled slowly. "Because it wasn't designed to be run by someone who doesn't understand the underlying logic. The architecture is adaptive. It learns patterns. It adjusts. It has personality. And it cannot be governed by standardized algorithms." The mayor nodded thoughtfully. "So the problem isn't your design." "No. The problem is they tried to strip the soul out of it." For a second, the room was quiet. Just the soft hum of the building's ventilation, the faint beeping of the crosswalk outside. Then she said, "Urban Flow Dynamics claims the issue is incomplete documentation." A short, humorless laugh escaped me. "My documentation is thorough. It's not a coloring book. If they can't understand it, that's not the same as it not existing." The mayor leaned forward. "I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to solve a crisis. And personally, I don't care who ends up looking bad in the process. What I care about is the 800,000 people who depend on that system every day." I met her eyes. They weren't pleading. They weren't manipulating. They were simply honest. It was unsettling how much that mattered. She slid a folder across the table. "Urban Flow Dynamics is considering shutting down your system completely and reverting to the old one." My pulse spiked. I didn't let it show. "That would be catastrophic," she added. "We'd lose years of progress and undo every improvement we've made. And based on legal review, they would be in breach of contract for failing to provide functional infrastructure." Something clicked in my mind. "Meaning," I said slowly, "the city could bring in its own expert to operate and repair the system." "Correct. And bypass the company entirely." She nodded once. For the first time in days, I felt the burn of something that wasn't anger. Possibility. I sat back, weighing the situation. If I agree to help, I'll need certain guarantees. She didn't hesitate. "Name them." "First," I said, "complete technical control. No board members breathing down my neck. No managers demanding explanations for decisions they don't understand." "Done." "Second, I choose my own team. Anyone I want." "Done." "Third, my name is credited on the patents. Not buried in the middle of a contributor list. Front-facing. Accurate." That one made her pause, not out of resistance but consideration. Then she said, "If the claim holds that you architected the adaptive core, and the company misrepresented your role, we can pursue corrective action. I'll have my legal team prepare the paperwork." I nodded. It was happening. The shift. The pivot. The leverage I never had before. "You've been thinking about this," she said quietly. "I'm always thinking," I replied. "It's what I do." She stood, extended her hand again. "We'll bring you in as the city's lead technical consultant, effective immediately." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. A leader's handshake. As I walked out of City Hall, my phone buzzed. A text from Stephanie. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Rachel's blaming the whole collapse on residual bugs in your outdated logic. Lindsay looks sick. Brace yourself. I smirked. Of course Rachel was doubling down. Her ego wouldn't let her consider that she might have mismanaged anything. Then another message came through. Lindsay wants to talk to you. Privately. She said it's important. I didn't respond right away. That night, I gathered every notebook I owned. Every hand-drawn chart. Every sidewalk observation. Every weird behavioral pattern that never fit neatly into an algorithm. I spread them across my living room floor. 15 years of the city's secrets. At 9:43 p.m., my phone rang again. Lindsay. This time I answered. Her voice was tight, like she was trying not to cry. Austin, I know what you did. That made me laugh. Really? You think I built a system designed to sabotage you? You left missing protocols, confusing variable names, sections of logic that don't match any known standard. Her voice cracked. I can't make sense of it. Maybe, I said, the system works exactly as intended, and maybe you're just not the person who can run it. There was a long silence. Then quietly, I need your help. Those 4 words must have cost her everything. Interesting, I said. A week ago, you were giving presentations about how outdated my methods were. I was wrong. That's an impressive sentence. You practicing it all day. She didn't rise to the bait. She just said, people are suffering, Austin. Whatever you think of me, they don't deserve this. Same argument Stephanie made. Same argument the mayor made. The one that hit hardest. Fine, I said. Meet me tomorrow. Public library. Study room 3. 10 a.m. Thank you, she breathed. Don't bring anything, I added. No laptop. No notes. Just yourself. The next morning, she was already sitting there when I walked in. Still polished. Still professional. But her eyes, they were different. Less arrogant. More human. For an hour, she talked through the failures. The logs. The chain reaction of breakdowns. And the more she described, the clearer it became just how deeply she misunderstood the architecture. When she finally ran out of breath, she looked at me and said, "It's not logical. Systems that should behave the same behave completely differently." "Because they're not the same," I said. "You're treating it like static code. But it's adaptive. Each intersection has a profile. A tempo." She stared. "That's not engineering. That's art," I finished. "Yes." She went pale. "This isn't documented anywhere. It can't be. You can't write intuition into a manual." And then I told her something she had never considered. You failed not because the system is flawed, but because you assumed you could reduce human behavior into neat little boxes. People don't work that way. Cities don't work that way. Her voice was barely a whisper. "So what do? "We don't do anything," I said. "You do something." She blinked. "What?" "You tell the truth tomorrow. To the board. To Rachel. To everyone. Full accountability." She looked like I'd asked her to jump off a bridge. "Rachel will never approve that." "I'm not asking Rachel. And if I refuse, then the city stays broken." I stood to leave, but she reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Her hand was shaking. "What if I do it?" she whispered. "What if I tell the truth?" I studied her face, really looked at her. For the first time, there was no arrogance, no polish, no rehearsed confidence, just fear and sincerity. "If you do that," I said softly, "I'll help you." The next morning, I put on my best suit and walked into Urban Flow Dynamics like I still owned the place. Security didn't stop me. They looked confused, yes, but not brave enough to intervene. The boardroom's glass walls gave me a perfect view of the battlefield. Rachel stood at the head of the table, gesturing at a slide blaming the system collapse on experimental engineering practices. A few board members nodded, too eager to believe it wasn't their incompetence. Lindsay sat to her right, staring down at her hands. When she finally raised her head, Our eyes met through the glass. She stood. Rachel's face froze. The boardroom erupted. Voices rising in confusion, shock, disbelief. The chairman slammed his gavel. Someone turned off the projector. At 10:37 a.m., the door opened. "Mr. Rodriguez," the chairman said, "the board requests your presence." I stepped inside. Moments later, Mayor Rivera appeared in the doorway with her legal counsel, dropping the final blow. The city was formally terminating its reliance on the company and hiring me directly due to breach of contract. Rachel sputtered. The board panicked. Someone swore under their breath. And I said, calm as a surgeon, "My team starts today. Stephanie will be joining me." Rachel snapped, "You don't have a team." "I will," I said, "starting with the people who understand that adaptive thinking beats rigid rules." I left them drowning in their own mess, and for the first time since they'd marched me out in the rain, I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge. Not yet, but justice lining up on the horizon. The morning after the board meeting felt different. Not triumphant, not victorious. Just still. Like the city was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do with the control I'd just taken back. I stood on the roof deck of City Hall at sunrise, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the skyline glow orange. Below me, traffic lights blinked out of sync across the grid like scattered fireflies. The system was alive, but confused, an animal pacing in its cage without its handler. This time, though, I wasn't alone. Stephanie met me in the new Municipal Innovation Department office. She looked nervous but lit up when she saw me. "They approved everything," she said, out of breath. "The access keys, the integration points, full privileges across all quadrants." I nodded. "Good. Let's get to work." And just like that, the war room came alive. We pulled in 2 junior engineers she trusted. Smart kids, hungry to learn, not afraid of breaking conventions. Maria Santos from the city's transportation department joined us at noon. She understood the roads better than anyone I'd ever met. We spread maps across tables, monitors across walls, a tangle of cables and data feeds turning the room into a living nervous system. I taught them the way I'd taught myself. Not with manuals, but with questions. "What do you hear in this?" I'd ask, pointing at a congestion heat map. One kid squinted. "It looks like a bottleneck forming here." "Don't just look. Listen. It's not a bottleneck. It's fatigue. Late shift workers from the warehouse district drive slower. Notice how the slowdowns cluster after midnight? That's human behavior, not algorithmic failure." They leaned closer, eyes widening. It was the same way I'd felt the first time I realized the city had a pulse. Bit by bit, quadrant by quadrant, we put the system back together. Not by rewriting it, but by reminding it how to breathe. It took 48 hours before everything synchronized again. 48 hours, and then at 7:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, the first miracle happened. A paramedic named Tony called. He'd never spoken to me before. Never met me. Didn't know what I looked like. "Don't know who you are," he said, voice hoarse. "But whatever you did, thank you. We got to a heart attack victim 6 minutes faster today." 6 minutes. That guy's alive because of those 6 minutes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was why I'd done it. Not because of Rachel. Not because of Lindsay. Not because of revenge. But because of the people stuck behind the wheel at 5 p.m., the parents rushing kids to school, the nurses trying to get to night shift, the paramedics fighting the clock. This was the work that mattered. And when the mayor held her press conference 2 days later, praising the innovative technical approach pioneered by consultant Austin Rodriguez, I didn't smile for the cameras. I just stood there with my team, watching city life start to flow again. By the end of the week, my inbox overflowed with offers. From Seattle, Portland, Phoenix, even a few Midwestern cities struggling with outdated infrastructure. For the first time in my life, people weren't asking me to justify what I built. They were asking me to replicate it. But the real moment, the true moment of revenge, was quieter. 1 month after the chaos, walking to City Hall, I passed by the lobby of Urban Flow Dynamics. Through the tall windows, I saw moving boxes, people packing their desks, empty cubicles where once the corporate elite held court. The company had lost its biggest contract, the one that kept them alive. Without it, they were collapsing. And there, near the entrance, stood Rachel. Her hair was unkempt, her posture stiff. She wasn't barking orders. She wasn't smiling that polished corporate smile. She just looked small. She saw me through the glass. Our eyes locked. I didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't lift my chin in victory. I just gave her a single, calm nod, the kind you give someone when the universe has delivered its own justice. Then I walked away. My team was waiting. 6 months later, I got an unexpected knock on my office door. Lindsay Brooks. She stood there in a simple blazer, not designer. Her hair still neat but not flawless. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind that come from losing both certainty and pride. "Austin," she said softly, "do you have a minute?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Go ahead." She sat with her hands clasped tightly. "I came to apologize. Properly this time. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence do the work. I thought knowing the language of business was enough," she continued. "I thought intelligence meant being right. But your system, your work, it humbled me." She swallowed hard. "I'm working at a small consulting firm now. Entry-level stuff. I'm trying to relearn everything from scratch. No shortcuts. No ego. I wanted to ask if there's any place for someone like me on your team, even if it's the lowest position." I studied her. She wasn't pretending this time. She wasn't selling anything. She wasn't performing confidence or competence. She was learning, and that mattered. "We might have an opening," I said slowly. "Junior role. You'd report to Stephanie. She'd be your mentor." Lindsay nodded immediately. "I'd be honored. But understand this," I said. "Joining this team isn't about redemption. It's about whether you can contribute to something bigger than yourself." She met my eyes. "I understand." For the first time, I believed her. That evening, I called my daughter, Jessica. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad." "Hey, Jess. Just finished a long day. You sound different," she said. "Happy different." I laughed. "Yeah, maybe I am. Mom told me about the job stuff," she said. "Sounds like things turned out." "Better than turned out," I replied. "I'm building something that matters." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm proud of you, Dad, not for getting back at them, for making something better." Her words landed deeper than any award, any contract, any praise from a mayor. After we hung up, I stepped out onto the roof deck again. Below me, the city hummed, not in chaos, but in rhythm. Red lights and green lights shifted like a quiet heartbeat. Emergency vehicles moved through intersections smoothly, gaps opening for them like invisible hands clearing the way. My city, my system, my legacy. But here's the truth I wish someone had told me years ago. The best revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's building something so powerful, so necessary, so undeniably yours, that the people who underestimated you are forced to live in the shadow of the thing they threw away. Rachel once called my work a mess. Maybe she was right about one thing. It was messy, complex, unpredictable, alive, just like the city it served, just like the people who depended on it, just like me. If you've read this far, you already know what it feels like to be underestimated, to have your work dismissed until the moment people desperately need it. So let me tell you one last thing. Sometimes the best way to get even isn't to tear anything down. It's to build something they can never replace.